Hello, hello. Welcome to the Sunday stream. Happy Father's Day. In Australia only, don't worry. If you're anywhere else in the rest of the world, it's probably not. I think it's only Father's Day here in Australia on this day. It's a really nice day too. I have two guests on today, which were on the last couple of times. Boffin and Karu, say hello.
Greetings.
Hello.
And yeah, as usual, discussing recent videos or an interesting topic. I posted a question this week and also commenting on my latest rant video, which I will happily put my hand up, was a rant. That's why I named it as such. In context, it wasn't about my annoyance at any people recently in the comments, although it came off as such. I should have actually, it was really born out of a conversation the previous night I had at a dinner with family, where an old grandmother wouldn't let go of asking me why I didn't want kids. And she looked at me like I was an alien every time I said no politely. And then the second time, my smile disappeared, and because she was getting more and more serious, she looked at me like I'd offended her, and she just wouldn't, I would say she repeated, why not? But how come? No, that's not good. You have to have kids. Unless you can't, you have to have kids. That's terrible. And it was just a very, she wasn't going to let it go. She was sitting to my right and she was just glaring at me, and it was very uncomfortable. And she even asked my missus the same question, and she just kept repeating the same insistence to her. And she felt uncomfortable and said, like, you could tell she didn't understand why this old woman wouldn't accept the answer we gave. So it was very interesting, and it engendered a really interesting conversation on the ride home. So, and also the next day, I felt like, yeah, this is a good topic to talk about when you're having a one-sided conversation and people won't listen to you. You can meet them halfway, but they don't meet you halfway. And they've already come to the table of the conversation having their mind made up. They have the perfect opinion. There is absolutely no nuance. It's only their worldview, their life, their experience. And it's just very interesting. Have either of you guys experienced anything like that? Boffin,
Never.
Karu?
Never. I have never experienced that in my life, especially on Discord. I've only had very productive conversations.
Shut up.
Yeah, I think everyone has it at some point in their life, human. I know I did when I was a young man. My grandmother in particular, on my mother's side of the family, she was very anxious for me to get married and settle down. Italian family. So it's, I think it's not only generational, but I think it's also probably in some ethnic DNA.
It's just kind of, it's not like I'm baffled by it. I know it happens, and especially the older you are, you're stuck in your ways. You know, people, they're from a different generation. I can give the old lady a pass, but it was just so stark. It's just really, really strange. It doesn't happen, I would say, yeah, probably doesn't happen as much or as uncomfortably as it does with, say, someone with a wider age gap. But it really made for an interesting discussion about a person actually not listening to your point of view. Even if you're giving a rational one and you meet them partway and say, yeah, I get it. I could have a conversation with anyone about the objectivity about the human race being here to reproduce, and family is normal and yada yada. I'll agree with that. But if you're talking about me and you're asking, do you have kids? No. Why not? And you give them an answer, and they're still puzzled. Okay, I'll repeat it one more time in case you didn't get me. I didn't explain myself. But when it's very apparent that you're annoyed that I don't make the same decisions in life or have the same ethics and morals as you, and you're kind of wagging your finger like a priest at me or something. That's kind of when it's annoying to me. I'm not. I've got a driver's license. You know, I'm a fully grown adult, and I can vote. Like, leave me alone.
I think it's obvious why that happens. You look at the old lady, and she reached the age that she did by taking all of the decisions that she made throughout her life, and she reached the old age that you talked about. So it's very easy to have that type of selection bias where all of the things that you've done reach the point of getting to that stage in life. So it's easy to look at it and say, well, I didn't go through college, or I went through college. I had kids. I had a husband. I did all of these things, and because I'm at the point where I'm at in my life, I'm a successful human being. And if you manage to live differently than they do, it's a bit of an attack on their own person, whether they like to admit it or not, because such a different type of lifestyle kind of attacks all of the decisions that they made, and it brings up a comment that you read a couple of streams ago when a person was talking about lost time or decisions that they didn't make. Well, everything that you do pretty much blocks off every other decision that you can make in your life. Hey, you choose to sit at home and cook a steak. Well, what are you not doing in that time? Everything else. You're not learning a new language. You're not refining your skills. You're not having kids. You're not raising kids, and so on and so forth. It's just a form of making themselves sure that they made the right decisions.
Yeah, or conversely, I know there was also a couple, they were talking about kids a little bit after that because that spurred on the conversation, and kind of I tried to divert the awkwardness by I think we started talking about kids with somebody else to kind of divert this uncomfortable interrogation I was having with the old woman. And I get where some people might not be able to have kids, or they missed the boat or whatever it is, so they have regret, and then they point the finger at you. So there's also the opposite end of the spectrum. They look at someone else who just chooses not to have kids, and they've wanted nothing more, but they're unable to have kids, and they look at you bitterly, and they can lecture you. So I get where it comes from, but man, come on. Do you realize how rude you might be being?
I think it's
So,
kind of analogous to what we talk about in the men's community all the time too. It's kind of like a blue pill mentality. I think people grow up in a certain era with a certain set of expectations from family, society, and that becomes, I think, imprinted in their minds as to what normal behavior, normal lifestyle um, is supposed to be. So
mm,
it's very understandable if you think about it in terms of how different groups of people get conditioned in various ways, and they keep those views of the world and of life throughout their lifetime.
yeah. Look, it also depends on what kind of person you are, because I look at myself. I've always been fairly open in conversations, fairly flexible. I'm much more of an agreeable person, and that agreeableness lets in different points of view, I think. And so I'm able to see and entertain another point of view without actually accepting it. I find it interesting. Kind of that exploration, creative writing part of me finds everything interesting, but I don't have to kind of grab it and embrace it. They're kind of objects that you can pick up. Ah, you like this, you like that. You're different to me, so they're separate from me. They're ideas and stories. Whereas a lot of people take everything very, very personally. So with me, my position when someone's insisting that I see theirs and they can't understand why I don't, immediately I'm like, hang on, this is a two-way street, isn't it? Like, it feels like you're talking to yourself, like this, and you're being rude. Whereas I know my missus, when she was being posed the question, her frame of reference is like, I told you my answer. Like, why isn't that enough? Like, do I need to repeat it in a different language? So each person's mindset or how they are is different to sort of being interrogated in that way. But I notice, especially with the older generation, I notice it with my mother, even with good intentions, she'll say, I can't understand why this person doesn't treat their son well, for instance. And she's really baffled. You can see, she says, I just can't understand how, that woman did this to this person. It's her family. I go, yeah, I know, Mum, but there are different people in the world. And for me, it's just elementary. Like, of course, like there's apples, there's oranges. Like there's not just apples that you're used to. And she's just, yeah, but I can't understand it. It's like, how can't you understand it? It is like that. That I'm pointing to you. That person is an idiot or an arsehole or not like you. But people just can't. Maybe they're using the wrong words. I don't know. But in any case, there was some. Most people got my rant, and my rant was a lot of fun to do. I know, and maybe it's reflective of some people thinking, oh, I'm really distressed. I enjoy kind of passionately ranting about something, or if one of you guys posed a question that I talked about before, it's not happening in my life, I can pluck out that anecdote and slingshot myself and emotionally convey, what I feel and, oh my God, let me tell you about this. But it's not necessarily that I'm demoralized in my life by it now. So I think a few people, minor people, took me the wrong way. Nothing really happened, though I didn't help myself by not putting the context before the video. I should have just made the whole video about the situation that happened with the elderly woman and not being able to see another person's point of view. But I thought I'll just touch on that. But the real topic here that people can relate to is in the comments online, where no one's even-handed in seeing your point of view and listening to you. They only see their point of view. So I lean too much in that direction. So my bad there, but most people got me. But it was a lot of fun doing that video. So there were a few comments. And also, if you're here live, if you would like to ask any of us a question, myself, Boffin, or Karu, or you have an interesting comment, question, or a reflection on these sort of issues where someone's talking at you, not with you. You're not in a conversation. You're either in a debate and you didn't even know it. You thought you were having a fair back and forth, but you're not. If you have any really pointed thing that you realize from that or learnt from that you want to share, if you're here during the live stream, make sure you either super chat me live, I'll see it, or add 3 smiley faces or yellow circles or emojis, and I'll have a look at it through the stream. A couple of the notable comments were from, first one was from literal vampire potbelly gobbler, whatever it is. Not my fault. Hard name to pronounce. But he said, in response to this, people talking at you and not with you. And by the way, guys, the guests here, feel free to butt in whenever you want. So I'm not just talking to myself. I'm not just talking at you as well. But he says, Aaron Clary has talked about this and how much it infuriates him. His response is generally, I don't answer the same damn question twice, or sometimes, I'm sorry, I could have sworn I already made a effing decision. He goes on to say, it's like the person is treating you like you don't even exist. They ask you a question, you give them an answer, and their response is essentially, that wasn't the answer I wanted to hear, please try again. They're treating you like a dancing monkey or like a robot that's just supposed to reflect their own thoughts back at them. Once this happens 1 or 2 times, it's generally time to disengage. You're not being conversed with, you're being talked at. Yep, I agree. But it's uncomfortable when an old woman is hanging off your shoulder. Your guys' thoughts? What do you think?
Keep putting Granny on blast, man. Make her feel worse about herself.
No. Look, I'm going to be an old man. I already am, but I'm going to be much older and probably as crazy in some way to some people. But I hope I'll have the awareness not to kind of impose myself on other people. I think I do. I don't know. It's always up to other people to judge, I guess. But again, it depends on the person judging you. Like I said, there's people... Oh, go ahead.
Well, you don't have cats yet, so that's a good sign.
Yeah. What about dogs, though? How come there's not the stereotype with, enjoy your dogs?
Well, dogs are nice and they don't eat your face if you pass away. I think dogs are a lot better companions. But going back to the comment that you've just read out, I'm. It seems like I don't know if it's a reflection of the person or on Aaron Clary. He's not somebody that I have a lot of respect uh, for reasons that you probably know. But it just seems that anyone that gives answers like that hasn't really been socialized properly enough. It's to me it just seems as though it's a way of dismissing people that are beneath him in the sense that, well, I'm a content creator. I'm the guy that has the microphone. So if somebody asks me the same question twice, I can just dismiss them.
Mm.
Look at any job that requires you to actually socialize. Look at lawyers. They'll listen to you rant for anything because you're paying them. Look at the people in your life. You talk to them, and even if they don't get your point, you try to explain it to them 2, 3, 4, 20 times, and until they get the idea. And you're never going to have that type of dismissive attitude towards someone. I do, but that's because I don't like people. It has nothing to do uh, with being incapable of putting in the time and effort with the individuals that are worth it. And going back to the example of the granny that you mentioned, I think I asked you the first time you mentioned this. Would you have been as annoyed with her if she had Alzheimer's and asked you what the time was 40 times in a row with very small breaks in between? What would have irked you more? Her asking
True.
you about having kids or asking for the time?
Not sure about what you just mentioned at the end, but yeah, I would give her much more of a pass if she had Alzheimer's. I get it, but I was unaware. It wasn't my grandma. It was like a friend's grandmother. It was just kind of difficult and awkward. But yeah, look, it's true. But I think it's not like I'm annoyed at her or putting her on blast for the joy of putting her down. Really, what came out of it was just an interesting conversation that I had with Stephanie about when people already have their mind made up when they're having a conversation with somebody that doesn't have their same point of view, and they don't have the ability to be comfortable with, yeah, I know what I like, or what I think, what my ethics and morals are, and I don't feel threatened by just hearing a diametrically opposed point of view. You know, and for me, I don't understand people's fear and brittleness to opposing ideas. If anything, if someone asks me, this was part of the whole dating thing in the past where they kind of baffled me with their fear and they said, well, don't talk about this or don't mention this. If she says this, no, you can't do. It's like all this fear around interesting questions. It's like, well, like either if it's not for you, great, you know you can't get along with this person. Or if it's a touchy subject, why am I afraid? Like I don't like the feeling of fear or censorship, being fearful of even discussing a point of view that's not like yours. If anything, if someone has a different point of view to me, feeling so threatened that I have to berate them and bludgeon them with my point of view until they submit is kind of making me feel like I think that I don't really believe what I believe. If someone said to me, you don't love your mother, I'm not going to kind of spurg out and, try and convince them that I do. I'll laugh it off. And one might say that I should have had that attitude with this old woman. But again, when the dog's barking at you and poking at you on your shoulder and you can't kind of ignore her, it was impossible to ignore her. So,
Yes,
it
but
was what it was.
I think that there's another layer there that maybe you're missing. A lot of people have subjects that they just don't touch, not because they don't have the ability to talk about the certain thing, but they just find it viscerally uncomfortable. I have a friend that just can't handle watching any type of animal cruelty. You can talk to him about any subject out there. It doesn't matter how taboo, how triggering, disgusting it is, he can talk about it for hours, have an intellectual conversation about it. But the second you start talking about hurting any animal, he just can't. He completely shuts down, and he even becomes aggressive in the conversation. Maybe you don't have anything like that, or you're mild enough to where, yeah, you get slightly annoyed, and you can just prance around it or tango around the topic when it's being pulled up. But for some people, that topic is kids. Like for them, having kids is probably one of the most important things that they've had in their lives. And they just can't picture somebody having a different opinion. And don't forget, she's from a different generation where children are valued way differently. It was a way to prove to yourself that you've, quote unquote, done something with your life. It's this is the result of everything that I went through and all of the sacrifices that I made throughout my life. And I think Boffin is here to kind of attest that. Every guy and every woman he probably knew in his generation, that was the goal of their life, to get married, settle down, and have a family.
Yeah, but even Boffin, I mean, I won't speak for you, Boffin. You can give me your thoughts. But even Boffin has the social tact to realize if you ask a question and a person's answering and they're uncomfortable, or they've given you the answer, not to keep berating them until you get the answer you want. I mean, I could as easily say I was a gay guy at the table and ask the old woman, like, oh, have you ever slept with a woman? And she's like, oh, no. Why not? Because it's nice, you know, like, it's great. Gay sex is like, and I just kept going. And she would feel uncomfortable. There's a level of social tact, especially with the experience of being older. I'll give them a pass because it's a different generation. But it's kind of like a combination of either arrogance or being completely socially inept, that you think, no, my world is your world, and you know, I've got to submit. I don't get it. What are your thoughts, Boffin?
Yeah, but you're missing one point, Human. First of all, Boffin picked the right gender when he was born. So he's not as attached to all of these ideas.
I think there's a couple of different flavors to this. If a kid, you know, a 7 or 8-year-old kid comes up to you at a party and says, "Hey, mister, you got a big nose."
Yeah.
You kind of understand that you're talking to a kid, and you can, you know, as obnoxious as a kid might be, you can, you know, banter back and forth with them, you know, push them away. You can kind of ignore the kid. The problem, I think, with an older person, and this is something, it may be particular to a small portion of the population, I don't know, but at least the way I was raised, it was verboten to be rude to your elders. And that was always the most uncomfortable situation for me personally. If an old aunt or uncle, grandparents, even, you know, anyone from an older generation was even unintentionally or intentionally needling you, they were trying to take you somewhere where you were uncomfortable, you weren't allowed to be rude in your response. And
But
that made the situation.
sure, and I get that, and I agree. Like, I've always been told to respect my elders, but not that I'd say that you need to be rude to them because they're not being respectful to you. I would still, like, I don't regret how I acted. I was just trying to sort of be quiet and diplomatic because I respect older people. And I don't think she was intentionally being rude. She was a nice woman, but it just brought out the lack of tact. And I'm pretty sure she's not senile. She was talking fairly fine. It was just she didn't let go of the topic. So, but I agree with what you're saying. We used to get raised to respect elders more because the elders had the experience by which you'd assume, you know, you can't, you're an idiot to talk down to them because they know more than you. Unless, like in this case, you can point to, well, I'm being respectful. They probably know more than me, but this has nothing to do with experience. This is just my personal values and what I choose to do and not to do. And she wasn't, having a conversation with me, trying to find out or interested in terms of why I didn't. It was just, why aren't you doing what I think you should be doing with your life?
Well, that's exactly the situation I think you found yourself in, where you were you were trained not to be rude in your response to her. I'm betting if you were sitting across the table from a 40-year-old woman or a 40-year-old guy, and they were needling you or making you uncomfortable in the same way, you'd probably, retort with a much more sharp response than you did with the old woman.
Yeah. And your comment about a kid being much ruder than or blunt than she was, being just really rude and saying you got a big nose or you're fat or whatever, pointing to just some deformity or you don't have a leg. You're hurt, but you give the kid a pass because they're naive and they don't know any better. You can't expect them to have the maturity of tact and awareness and things like that. And unless the person's senile, as Kari mentioned, and things like that, there's a level of giving them a pass. But when you can see they're not, and I've encountered a lot of people, young and old, say for instance, a young person in the comments, they're very brash and sure of themselves, and they're rude and obnoxious. They don't have social tact. I can even give some of them a pass because they're younger, and I may not have been like that when I was younger, but there are people that have bigger egos. They're much more sure of themselves. They live online now, so their sense of confidence in terms of their actual confidence in real life, there's a disconnect there. So I can kind of give that a pass. But the older you get, there is something to the saying of you should know better, you should be wiser, you should do things better, you should conduct yourself a little bit better. And you're free not to, but you don't want to be ridiculed. Don't act ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree. The only problem is, tact isn't it's not a universal trait in people, and a lot of times you just stumble across people who are either completely ignorant of how offensive they're being, or they just don't care.
And there's also the fact of when you stand up stubbornly and you insist on your point of view, you feel good. You're kind of standing up for your values, and it actually energizes you to stand up for something. It's kind of like asserting a boundary. But then when you do it in this kind of dysfunctional way, when there's no need for it, it's kind of like you're swinging your sword at someone, and the person's like, whoa, 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 I didn't know this was a fight. I don't have my sword out, and this person's trying to cut you down.
Yep.
Feel free to chime in at any time, guys. I'm going to read the next comment. The next comment by Place of Wisdom. He says, you are the only person who has to live with the choices you make. And he follows that with a quote by Thomas Sowell. He says, it's hard to imagine a more stupid or more dangerous way of making decisions than by putting those decisions in the hands of people who pay no price for being wrong. And it's also, it's not just about being wrong. I think a lot of people's frustration is no one wants to talk. Everyone wants to assert superiority and dominance over the next person. And it's not just for power, it's for self-assurance, I think, especially in the social sphere, where they want, girls to be in their frame and to dominate and not to be taken advantage of by the other, whether you're male or female. And there's no relatable, well, who are you? And I'll tell you who I am. And we can cooperatively kind of come together and get along and shake our hands. It's like, no, you come here, I'm not going over there. And the other person says the same thing. And it translates into these antagonistic conversations where there's no tact. It's basically, this is my world, this is what I think. I'm energized because I got this ego that keeps me safe, and you're not going to take advantage of me. And why is the world stupid? And then on the same breath later, it's like, why am I alone? Why can't I find a girlfriend? Why can't I find friends? Well, you won't meet anyone halfway to listen to them. That's what a conversation is. You talk, and then they talk, you listen. You don't just wait to speak.
Yeah, but you're not the only person that has to live with the choices you make.
Sure.
Throw yourself off a bridge. Let's see if your parents suffer. Let's see if your family suffers. Let's see if your kid is going to have as good of a life with you out of it. I think it's a bit libertarian, to say the least, to have that type of interpretation on life. Even the smaller decisions, somebody's going to have to replace you at work, and then everything else, all the efforts and resources that have been put into you and to building you into the person that you are now, they all go to waste.
Sure, but you can't be completely selfless, Karu, as well. I know you're kind of being devil's advocate. I kind of like that you give the other point of view. But where's the limit? Do you take care of everyone's needs first before your own? There's countless stories of guys, especially I've noticed a lot of Indian guys, their parents want them to do a certain thing a lot, or do what the family wants, or marry the certain girl, and you end up pleasing your family your whole life. And then by the time you pass 50, it's like, I've done everything, and this isn't my life anymore. I'm not happy. I did everything, and now I'm responsible for everything I did for other people, and I don't like it.
Well, obviously not, but the Aristotelian idea of temperance seems to have gone out the window with a lot of the conversations that you find in the manosphere. Now that you're in a relationship, you've dealt with more things that had to be balanced in your life than you ever have before. When you were alone, all you had to deal with was yourself. If you put a plate somewhere, you knew that it wasn't going to be moved. Every decision that you made didn't impact anyone around you. Now that there's somebody else there, well, you're going to think twice about the car you're going to buy. You're going to think twice about a lot of the things in your life that will impact the people around you. And I think that's natural. I'm not saying start living your life for other people, but be a bit realistic with the choices that you make.
Sure, but I could also say that bleeds into even a conversation with someone, because both of them are talking about being intimate with someone. You know, there's the holistic intimacy of being with someone in a relationship, and there's also the momentary intimacy of engaging in a conversation, like I was having with this woman. So both of them have this tact of, I have to consider the other person's opinion. I can't be rude. She doesn't know me that well, this old woman, so I can't just swear and think she has my sense of humor. I have to sort of see she's from a different generation, and be a bit better with, adjust my language accordingly. So there's all that sort of tactfulness, but it still is an intimate interaction, either a conversation or generally your life with family or the person you're with in a relationship. So you do have to consider other people, but you also have to have that consideration about the speech you use, and seeing if it's coming back to you, or is it that they don't care about the words they say. So are they just living in their own bubble? So would they be the kind of person that would throw themselves off a bridge and not give a shit about how the effects of other people? So there's a degree, like the intimacy of a conversation, or the larger intimacy of a relationship with family or somebody else. So you still need to consider them, but not at the expense of you being a doormat as well. Like, you meet people halfway or partway where you're not just being completely used.
Oh, of course, I agree with that. However, on the idea of tact, I don't necessarily agree with you and Boffin. I think tact is the last thing that we need nowadays. I mean, having too much tact and using soft language, trying to mollycoddle everyone, that's what got us in the place that we are now. You know as well as I do that because of the way you were raised up, Boffin was raised up, and I was, we can handle a smack across our heads. We can handle an insult. We can let things slide off of us like we're a duck going through water. But do the same to some of the younger generations, and they don't know how to handle it. Like now we have hospitals performing procedures on people that if you would do yourself in your own home, that's the wrong analogy. But let me put this in a different way. As far as I know, hospitals are places for sick people. But somehow, if you want to cut off certain body parts, you're not supposed to be viewed as sick. And we need to use a specific type of language for these people. We need to mollycoddle them. We need to give them spaces where they feel safe, and so on and so forth. I think we need the exact opposite. I'm here saying that we need to bring a bit of the bullying back. We need to look at certain groups of people and just call them what they are.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Boffin.
I just want to jump in here real quick, Human, and Karu queued this up nicely for me. I think sometimes a conversation is not a conversation. There's another dimension to this whole discussion. You gave the example of the 50-year-old Indian guy who did everything his family wanted him to do, and he got to be an old man and he realized that he lived his family's expectations for his life. But we've had a lot of conversations about the importance of older generations guiding younger generations, of trying to impart some of that wisdom that they've accumulated over the course of their lifetime. And a lot of times, like Karu just said, sometimes the way to do that is not with a feather duster, but with a baseball bat. And even though we may look at it as being a conversation, the reality is that it's more of a lecture. So I think it's kind of, I think what we always struggle with in all of these issues throughout our lives is, where do you draw the line? When your mother's lecturing, when a mother's lecturing her daughter about she needs to get married, the mother is trying to point her daughter in the right direction, but at some point the daughter needs to push back. They need to find that balance between her mother's desire for her to get married, start a family, have a nice house, and her desire for whatever she wants to do. There's a balance in there, and I think we're always trying to figure out where to draw that line.
Yeah. Again, I think the healthy thing in psychology, and even old literary texts going back however many hundreds or thousands of years, whether it's the mentorship of like elders to young people or mothers to daughters and things like that, or even sort of philosophical Greek ones and things like that, there's a clear point where you sever the umbilical cord and you become a man or you become a woman. So you're instructed and you're told what the right thing to do is, but then at the end of it, like you should make your own decision. And I know in the past there was a lot like, no, you just make the decision that God wants of you or what the family or the state. But especially in these times, I just find it odd and sometimes irritating that you are trying to listen to them and take their advice. And I think today, older people as well, or maybe it's always been like this, but now people use the baseball bat, as you said, Boffin, much more than anything in between. I mean, you don't have to use the feather duster, you don't have to use the baseball bat, but a civil and intelligent in between, and knowing to what degree you need to use more of a baseball bat, but use the language. How can I put it? If you know how to mentor, if you know how to communicate, and if you're not stubbornly selfish in your point of view, where it's just what you want and you don't even know how to communicate, you're going to come off as a bully. But the best mentors and teachers will, and the people who care about you the most, if they do, that they will, there's no point saying, well, I've just got a temper and you have to deal with it, but I love you. And so when I communicate with you, I'm going to be an arsehole, but that's just the way I am. Well, sorry, you're not going to mentor anyone. You're not going to convey your lessons properly. You're not doing any good to anyone. If anything, you're going to push your daughter away if you're a mother that's a narcissist. But deep down you're saying, well, I meant well. It's like, it doesn't matter what you meant. Just like it doesn't matter that you meant to start your diet on Monday. You didn't. It's like how you do things, how you communicate. So I can give old people some leeway, but not completely. They don't get a complete pass because I know within their own world, when they're talking amongst people their own age, they butt heads because one person's being stubborn. And if you don't want to have that uncomfortable interaction, learn how to temper and talk more intelligently. And with that comes also the realization that, well, I'm trying to meet them part way, but they're not. Them being stubborn, like this old woman. So objectively, I know I was not in the wrong. I can excuse the age and everything. And if she has dementia, yeah, I can excuse that a lot. But the concept of meeting people part way, listening to them, and being able to have a better dialogue, I think is really important. The excuses and the exceptions really, I think part of the world, like Karu said, people go round and around and intellectually can have a case to be made for someone who does things the bad way, and maybe it was their childhood and they don't know how to speak and it's not them. It's like, well, we all know what a good standard is of communication and choices to make versus bad and good results. We can make a lot of excuses why we don't do them, or we make the wrong choices, or we talk badly, or we don't communicate well. But we all know what the better way to do things is. So all the kind of excuses of, well, there's an excuse for a person having a temper or being a bully in a conversation. Oh, it's because they're in it from a different generation. Well, mostly no, from my point of view, but a little bit of yes, because they're older, different generation, and they were brought up differently. But socially, if you were to survey 1,000 people and say, what's the best way to communicate? What's the best way to talk, listen, things like that? I think most people would give a similar answer in terms of fairness, how to sort of have a mutual fair conversation in terms of listening and speaking.
Well, look, I have no disagreement with you. You know, I think everyone would prefer to have that 1950s TV dad who sat him down on the edge of the bed and had the rational, calm, loving discussion. But again, most people, I don't think have that skill set, and they can resort to you know, whatever tool they find most intuitive. And unfortunately, you know, it's either going to be the helicopter parent who really doesn't want to waste a lot of time with their kids, or the emotional doesn't know how to handle the situation parent with a baseball bat.
Yeah,
That's the sad reality of it.
sure. Look,
Yeah, but
go ahead.
oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, there's a multitude of different people out there, but that baseline of what fair handshake in society, like we used to have more rules socially, more etiquette, that regardless of what I was like inside or behind closed doors, there was a way to speak and fairly relate to people within a certain margin out there. Now all bets are off, and there are a million and one excuses for, I was diagnosed with this, I've died, like, it's like I have to start from zero with everyone because there's no mutual handshake. And if they act badly towards me, if they act in a way that they would not appreciate being done to them, well, that's different because I'm this and, you know, I've got an excuse. I've got a get out of jail free card. Well, most of the time it's not relevant unless you've got some extreme thing you're diagnosed with. I don't really find many people's excuses to continue acting badly, to screwing up relationships, blaming the world, but then saying, yeah, I've got all this dysfunction, but I can't do anything about it, and that's just the way I am, and everyone needs to accept it. It's like, well, no, they don't. No, they don't. You could be better.
Yeah, but Boffin, you brought up the 1950s BS, and I have a question regarding what you said. How many times did the rational, calm, loving discussion when you had hot cocoa in your hand worked? And how many times did the belt work?
To be completely honest, Guru, the belt was always an order of magnitude more effective than the hot cup of cocoa.
Depends how old you are. I think the belt works less when you start becoming a teenager. There
Yes.
you start,
Yes.
because you kind of know it's like animals. You're younger, the the lioness nips the cub on the teeth to shock it into doing the right thing or stop doing the wrong thing, you know? Whereas when it gets older, you nip the same cub or, you know, young adult cub, lion, it starts into a fight. There's pushback. There's a sense of, you know yourself a bit better. You can read the terrain. You know the difference between right and wrong. You're not just led by animal impulses. And I think it's the same with kids. You get to be a teenager and a young adult, or you're approaching, there's that bridge of, it's not just the belt anymore. It needs to be the civil nuance of how to speak and listening. And, you know, you'd hope that a father would not resort to the belt if he's got a 16-year-old son, but sit him down, not with a cup of cocoa, but as his young, almost adult son, and talk to him like another person to impart any kind of wisdom. But you're not, I think when you're very young and naive, you can't really impart wisdom, or it doesn't stick. What sticks is shock value. But when you're older and you're naturally curious about women, the world, becoming an adult, moving out of home, how to navigate, I want to know the rules, wisdom is able to be embedded. So that's why I think the baseball bat or the belt works better the less mature you are, the less experienced you are. But when you start becoming older and you're expected to become an adult, you're going to have a license, you're going to start dating, you're going to possibly start reproducing and things like that. Yeah, you have to be talked to and related to like the adult you're expected to become very shortly. It's not just going to happen like that.
Agreed.
I don't know if that's the case. In my experience, even older guys are led by their little head rather than their big head, particularly when it comes to dating. Yes, they might get an easier time when it comes to understanding certain social pressures and decorums and everything else. But I don't know how much of that is them genuinely interacting with an idea that's being presented to them, and how much of that is just the repetition of just going through life. You go to 10 parties, you're going to know how to conduct yourself when you're one of those spaces. You never go to one, chances are you're just going to act in a manner that you did in the place that most resembles that certain party. And I don't know. If you look at life, the best instructors or the best mentors are the ones that kick you down. It's always the people that had health problems that know how to prevent a certain illness. You have heart problems, yeah, you're probably going to work out, you're going to take your medicine, and you're going to do everything you can to have a healthy heart. And I think that's just how life is, and that's how people truly learn. They need to really be knocked down for them to gain actual wisdom out of something. The people that can just learn from ideas and from reading and from the experiences of others, I think that those are the minority.
Yeah, I agree. I think most people, like when you look at the stats and how most people are there, you know, most people are generally much more outgoing naturally than being born as introverts. I would say most people only change for the better with trauma or something forcing them to. Simply for the fact that how many people do you know you can have these kind of conversations with? Most people are very incurious. So given that most people are incurious, they're just going to be on biological autopilot their whole lives until life kicks them in the stomach and they have to think about it because it was such a traumatic moment that they want to avoid it. And the only way to avoid it is to think your way forward to put a wall between you and that experience tomorrow. But if nothing happens you're just going to keep, you know, getting drunk, going to the pub, sleeping with women, just rinse and repeat and thinking that's just life. But I think if you're naturally much more curious or an introvert and you think a lot, you're much likely to develop ethics to avoid red flags that other people just kind of keep walking through and stumbling over through their lives. So it depends on what kind of person you are too. Sorry, Boffin, what were you going to say?
I just wanted to add something to the point Carew made about mentors. I've had a couple of men in my life that I considered mentors. And I think the best mentor you can have is one that knows how to use both the carrot and the stick. Sometimes they need to dress you down, they need to put you in your place, they need to point out where you screwed up. And then the other tool that they use is to build you up, to make you feel good about what you've accomplished, to recognize that you're making progress. And I think the most talented mentors are the ones that know how to use both of those tools appropriately in balance.
Well, I agree with that, but who does that today?
Yeah.
Look at the newer generation. Let your kids express themselves. Let your kids do what they want. Oh, your kid says he's a girl now? Well, better take him to the hospital. Oh, now it wants to be a boy again? Do that again.
Yeah, it's very strange to me, the rudeness and lack of noticing other people. I've often said, for someone that spent most of their life alone, single, and not wanting to be intruded upon by, the normies out there, I'm sort of baffled. Like, they're in the social space much more than me, and they love it. They get fueled by it. Kids, parties, birthdays, outings, holidays, just always out, out, out. And to them, they're very bored being on their own. Whereas I'm very aware of me intruding on other people's spaces when I'm at the supermarket and out there. And maybe that's because I want to be left alone. So I want to make sure I leave you alone, and I'm aware of your social space and things like that. I don't want to intrude on you. So that, I think, as an introvert or a homebody, you learn the social, those social tact things, simply because you want it reciprocated to you. You want to be respected. You don't want to impose yourself on other people. Things like that. Whereas them, they don't care. They just pop out a lot of kids. They're loud. Their kids express themselves. You see in the supermarket, the kid just grabs chips off the counter and just opens it up, and the mum's on the mobile phone. It's just baffling to me for the people that you'd think they'd learn, they'd be masters of the social sphere. The more they spend in it, the more they regress to complete nothing. Like, I find, and maybe I'm being presumptuous, but I find I'm a master in awareness of a sphere and tactfulness, much more than these people who spend so much time in it. It sometimes it baffles me when I see it.
But you just described the people that you have a one-sided conversation with. Those are exactly the people that you encounter that are not going to converse with you. They're just going to vomit, words.
But don't you think it's kind of counter to everything? Like the old woman saying, you've got to have family, you've got to have people around you, conversations, and a lot of parties, and like a family's great. Look at all these, groups of people. You can't be alone. Yet you don't even know how to talk to me. Like I thought you'd know what tact is. I thought you'd know what rudeness is in imposing your views on people. You would be kind of an expert in sort of lubricated conversations with other people and understanding what another person is like and having fruitful interactions with people. Yet you're completely oblivious. Me, I don't want many people around me, but I'm very aware of you and respectful of you. But you don't do the same for me. That's the thing I find kind of really stupid. They should be better socially than me.
Well, I hate to be indelicate in this conversation, but how many people have to consent in order to get a woman pregnant?
What's the segue? Like, what are you trying to say, Boffin?
How many people have to consent in order to get a woman pregnant?
Define people.
Define consent. Define woman. Define everything.
Look. In
many, I understand the word many. I understand the word define.
Well, look, I'll rephrase it. In the modern world, it's generally accepted that both parties should consent on the way to a pregnancy. But the reality is that only one party has to consent, to get a woman pregnant. And I think that, that is a very, it's a very primitive attitude. It's very, animalistic behavior. But I think when you're talking about people in general, you're obviously a very self-aware person, human. You think about these things. You think about how you interact with people, as do I think a lot of your audience thinks about these issues. But the reality is that there are a lot of people who never give these things the first thought. They're on autopilot. They're kind of like the bulls in the china shop. They're crashing around through life, bumping into things, tipping things over. They leave a path of destruction, but they never look back to think about, to reflect on what they've done. So
Let me ask both of you a question then. Do you think the people that like are indelicate in kind of bullying in conversations where they only see their point of view, do you think that kind of that's a do I use the word insecurity or overcompensating for them on the topic they talk about? So, for instance, the old woman maybe is pushing it on me because she sees family disappearing. Families are growing up. She's getting old. She's looking back on her past, but it's so precious, and she just values the experiences so much, and she doesn't want to let go. And so not wanting to let go of it and feeling insecure, like it's slipping away, or she doesn't have it in her life anymore and she's getting older, that sort of fragile nature of that. There's no more strength. There's no more foundation. That's why she's trying to kind of impose it to me to kind of relive it, to make that world come alive again. I don't know.
I think that's the point that Carew made when the conversation started.
No, I think that now he's doing the human thing and he's giving people way more credit than they actually deserve. He's overinflating the intelligence of people, which is what he does a lot. So no, I don't think that that's the case at all. I mean, most people like to criticize, judge, and give advice outside of their area of expertise. That's pretty much the human condition. And it's what happens when you listen to any internet guru, any person in chat. If you have a health issue, you're never going to go on Reddit and ask people what they think about your symptoms. Look at who most people are listening to. Guys that have no relationships. They've been single for a long time, yet they are the ones that are giving you advice on how you should get a woman. It's amazing, isn't it? They're not listening to the couple that's been married for 50 years. And even that wouldn't be good advice. If you really want to learn how to get with a lot of people, go out and talk to people that socialize, talk to guys that have a lot of relationships. Those are the people you should be talking to. You want to learn how to have a good marriage? Talk to someone that's been married for 60 years and they seem like they're actually happy. Don't talk to the guys that show you cars and Rolexes and cigars and whatever else, but they've been single for the past 30 years. Like, how is that going to help you?
Yeah, it's harder to. It sounds rational, but people just can't do it in the heat of the moment. They get flooded by the impulse to lean into whatever they've always done. You know, they always say that we don't really make decisions. We just have a split second verification of our impulses. So we want to do a certain thing, just like we want to jump in bed with the hot bimbo that our sober brain knows is bad for us, or we've done it before and it never led anywhere where good. So I think the same in these conversations. These people who are so-called experts are doing the same. They're impulsively instructing other people in an unrealistic way in terms of what to do and, earn money and all this stuff. But they don't talk about they don't talk in terms of experience outside their wheelhouse. So, for instance, say you're a dating guru and you've always got one shtick of how you should date, and you've written a book, you know, your 1, 2, 3 method of, I don't know, whatever it is, right? And you're known for it. You're not going to tend to want to listen to a guy who's written another book and converse with them, because that kind of, your wheelhouse is threatened. But I think exactly with this stuff, helping a wider variety of people and having a wider conversation, because my life and how I'm wired is not like other people. But I think if people are open enough not to use the bat on everyone when they converse, you're able to impart different types of points of view that are all rational. You know, my experience of how I went about things, I'm not saying you should follow it, but an old woman, I'm just using her as an example, or an old man coming in with a bat and saying, "You're wrong, human, you're wrong. You went, yeah, it's not right. Don't talk about this stuff," because, you know, it's able to have rational conversations where, look, I went through this. This worked for me. It's not a blueprint for everyone, but the type of thinking that went behind it, how I went about things, that's the important thing that can translate to the next person. Not the map, but the thinking behind the map is, I think, where people can chew on this stuff, and it can help them in their particular situation. Does that make sense? Or am I waffling on?
Well, it makes sense to people who are willing to be open-minded and rational. But your example, Human, that you gave of the dating guru who found a technique that worked for him, and he kind of parks himself there, I think is analogous to the case of the old lady who wants to know why someone wouldn't want to have children, because that was a place where she found satisfaction, contentment. She sees value in that. I think we all tend to stick to where we're comfortable. We find things that work. We develop a view of the world, based on our personal experience as to what works and what doesn't work. And I think a lot of times most people find those comfort zones, and they like to hover around in there. And right or wrong, I think a lot of people feel compelled to share their views and opinions with other people, not realizing that they're actually talking to someone else with different goals, different ambitions, different life experiences.
Can we all agree, though, that once you're an
No.
adult, yeah, I know. That's fine, as long as we're polite to each other. See, that's also why I wanted to talk about, are you in a one-sided conversation? That's why I thought it would probably be good for us to show an example of different points of view, but being able to get along and listen and see each other's point of view, and not just kind of me just use a bat to get Boffin and Karu to talk like I talk and think like I think. But do you think that we can all objectively agree that whether it's conversation or imparting wisdom or imparting advice or giving your point of view, if you had to pick a technique, the technique of not using a bat is the better one for an adult? Because everyone, like when you're an adult, you don't like being told what to do. You don't like being told what to do as a kid, but you got no choice. And then you get lessons imparted into you that you didn't know because you hadn't had experience. But the older you get, you don't like being lectured and talked to. You don't like the bat being used on you. It's much better to impart whatever. This old lady, right? I'm happy to allow her conversation between us. But if she's not using a bat on me, can we all agree that the bat is not the tool to use once you get older?
Yes, I will agree with that, with a few exceptions. Yes.
I
Go ahead, Karu.
No, I agree with Buff, and there are definitely exceptions out there. Some people will ask you to use the bat directly because they enjoy it. So, but on average, yes, I don't think a bat should be the first thing that you you reach for in any situation. But it does depend who you're talking to.
Look, I fully agree that after, say, the old woman's case, but say transpose the old woman's case to someone middle-aged, say, there's a point where you reach for the sword or the bat after you realize the person is acting like a prick, or you don't exist there. They're lecturing you. Then I'm fine with getting the bat out to combat them, because basically they're using a bat and you don't, and you have to defend yourself. But initially, the way to generate a good discussion, to give people your point of view and maybe learn something as well. That's also the arrogance. Like these people that think they don't have to learn anything. And there's this fear of maybe their mind being changed, and I think that also ties into your sense of believing actually what you're saying. Like, do you have confidence in it? Or is it a platitude you plucked out of the Manosphere or a Tony Robbins event, and you use it to impress people and yourself, but you can't really live it if you're on a date? But you're just used to bludgeoning people because it's like a very poetic way of speaking, or it's a platitude that kind of really impacts. So I think a lot of people don't really believe a lot of their stuff, and their insecurity shows when they have to use the bat to get their point across.
Yeah, but go ahead, Boffin.
I think there are some good examples of what you just described, Human. I personally, I think Andrew Tate is a good example of that. I think a lot of people use that hyper bluster, that super alpha persona, a lot of times to hide insecurities. The tendency to go on the offensive before someone can wound you in some way. So I think that's an easy recognizable personality trait in a lot of people who tend to be overbearing.
There was a comment here. Go ahead, Karu, while I bring up a comment.
Well, I wanted to take it back a bit to the situation that you've described with the old lady. And then the question becomes, was she using a bat or was she not? Because you could have perceived it as a bat. I'm sure you remember conversations that you've had with your parents or with your friends when you were younger. And you perceived it at the time as being a bat, even though it was nothing but. So from the old woman's point of view, I assume at least that she was trying to help you in any which way that she could. She thought that her ideas or whatever she was trying to pressure upon you would have been something that would have made your life more flourishing. But you just perceived that because of the insistence that she used, you perceived it as being a bat and her trying to impose her life choices onto you. And I think it's very hard, depending on where you are in life, to notice the nuances of what people are actually trying to communicate.
Okay, let me answer that and say, yeah, I can see that, right? The fact that I can see that nuance, why isn't it translated to her not being able to see the nuance of my opinion? So again, I can meet her halfway and say, yeah, I perceive the bat because she kept poking me insistently, and we could not move forward after I gave her an answer of like, no, thank you. So it's basically me saying, no, thank you, and her saying, no, take it. You must, like here, like she's trying to force something down my throat. And I'm politely saying, no, thank you. So I can agree that maybe she's not trying to do that. She's not intentionally being rude. But if I'm politely letting her know that no, thank you, at some point, the no, thank you turns into a fuck off. So I can't just be a doormat a lot. And I know my agreeableness allows me to be less blunt earlier on than most of you guys. But I think that's kind of I don't want to lose that. And that's why I kind of develop my my language in terms of learning how to either rebut these people or walk away, because I don't want to be as rude as they are. So I can see what you're saying. Maybe she's not using a bat. I'm perceiving a bat because it annoys me and because I've had it all my life. Why don't you want kids? Why don't you want kids? Why don't you want kids? Maybe it annoys me more than most people. I can see that. But she's not as open-minded of even just hearing a no thank you from me. I mean, why do I have to... Why am I extending so much understanding to her and she won't sort of give a little bit to me? Just in terms of fairness, that's all I'm saying, you know?
Yeah, I understand that, but ultimately you decide what gets under your skin. And I think that's the most important point of the conversation. Somebody can use a bat on you, but if you either have the ability to dodge the bat or they have the strength of a 2-year-old kid, it doesn't matter how they swing the bat, they're not going to hurt you.
Yeah. I know, but also I go back to what I said before. Do I then have the permission to ask her if she slept with a woman? Why doesn't she try lesbianism as well? Like, that's completely rude. But it's a...
Well, I would.
Yeah, I know, but you know what I mean about sort of like, you're old enough to know when, even amongst your own friends, when you're being kind of rude and pushy and stuff. I don't know. But I just want to talk, for me, it's just a basic concept. Like, we can talk forensically in all these different areas, and maybe this, and maybe childhood, and maybe because she's older and stuff, but just about the concept. And sure, we can give exceptions and give her a pass here and there, but just about the concept of, and this is why I made the video touching on comments in the comment sections and videos where people like to pile on and they don't want to see another person's point of view and they want to make fun of someone, like a game of I'll make them suffer so I feel bad. But it's really like, this is the whole problem, I think, of people even dating, having conversations, having friends. They get off on using the bat on people, enjoying them squirm, and then later on complaining about the very things they use the bat on. You know, the bat generates a lack of conversation. The bat generates loneliness. The bat generates a lot of this stuff. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have the bat in your back pocket when someone becomes obnoxious, you know, after the first couple of times, or where you see it's warranted because they're coming at you with the bat, so you have to defend yourself with the bat. But I'm saying all these people that use the bat, I can excuse them, just like you can excuse people that they had a certain childhood or they were diagnosed with XYZ, but it ain't my problem. I don't have to manage you that way. I'm not your father. I don't have to tolerate the things that should have been, you know, softened or civilized in you by your parents. You know, yeah, you can excuse people, but you don't have to live with it. I'm just talking about what is the better way to be? What's the better kind of conduct in a conversation? Again, we could talk about the woman as an isolated case, but what does it teach me about what the middle ground is? It should be more like, you know?
Well, I think the reality is a lot of times in these situations, we can't mind read. We don't know what the other person's motivations are. And I'm always inclined to give the other person the benefit of the doubt if you know you're not sure where they're coming from. For whatever their motivations are, if I believe it's unintentional, I'm a lot more apt to give them a pass. Now, there have been times in my life where people that I've worked with, for instance, gave me a hard time about something, and after a while, it became clear that not only was it intentional, but it was malicious as well. So, in the cases where it's obvious, that person becomes someone that I think for your own well-being, it's best to avoid them as best you can. For the people where it's ambiguous, you're not sure where they're coming from, what their intentions are, I have no problem giving them a pass. But if the behavior becomes a pattern, I think it's another one of these social dynamics. These are the people that you avoid or you push out of your life. You just don't spend time around with them unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah, look, largely I give the old woman a pass because of the generational gap, and I know she's not doing it to be obnoxious. She doesn't mean to do it. I know. I'm just talking about the effect of it and the kind of the divide between the two of us. I wasn't able to kind of talk to her about this, and I would have liked to. Again, maybe it's my expectations. For me, it's if I'm talking to someone and there's a divide, you can always ask why and how. And if I was her, again, I'm not going to put words in her mouth. I would have said, "But why don't you?" And you can say, "Well, I always wanted kids because of blah blah blah. You can give me your experience, and a friend of yours did this and that, and they regret it, and blah." I'm happy to have those. But if it's just the one trick pony of do it, have kids, have kids, have kids, have like it's like stop hitting me. Like I've put my arms up. Can you not see? I've said no. I've said no. How many times do I have to say no? Do I need to use a different language? So again, you can excuse them, you give them a pass, but also to what degree? You know, the age difference just doesn't excuse. I don't know, intact in terms of making someone uncomfortable. You don't just keep saying, "But why not? But why not?" And you see me giving the same answer and squirming and smiling at her politely and saying, "Well, I don't know what else to tell you. I just don't want to, never wanted to have kids, and that's it. Sorry." Yeah, but. It's just like someone force feeding you when you're full. It's kind of rude.
It
So,
is rude. It's rude and it's incredibly insensitive. But you also made a decision, human. You made the decision to stay rational, to stay polite, to basically eat a shit sandwich in a bad situation.
yeah.
So, unfortunately, this is interpersonal dynamics. This is the way people interact with one another, and it's unfortunate. I think we'd all love to live in a world where people are polite and rational and have a productive conversation and never resort to childish insults and put downs and make people uncomfortable, rudeness. But it's the world we live in.
Mm.
I disagree with everything that Boffin said. We need more insults. We need to put people down more. We need to do all of that stuff because it is needed. It's
Karu, you're like my ex-girlfriend. You just kind of say the opposite of everything. You disagree
well,
with
it's
everything.
true. That's how people build character. That's how you learn to deal with certain things in life. Yeah, granted, you're going to have people fall through the cracks and they're not going to be able to deal with the bullying and everything else. They're not going to be able to grow. But overall, suffering is what makes you better.
Well,
Each time you go ahead.
let me ask you, Carew. So, if this old woman had gone on all night long nagging human about why he doesn't want to have children, how would that make him a better man?
It would test his patience. He wouldn't spurg out at the old woman. And by the end of the night, he'd be able to deal with that situation if it ever popped up again.
Well, that's exactly what happened.
And that's what he did.
But he didn't.
He endured the suffering, and he's a better person for it.
But
yeah, but why do I need to? Why does it need to swallow up that whole night with people? That moment will never come again, and she's kind of imposing herself like a wet blanket over my night and making me feel uncomfortable. Yeah, I learned something from it, but she took a lot away from that night without letting it go. Go ahead, Boffin.
And I'm guessing, Human, that there were probably some of the other guests that were uncomfortable with her behavior as well. I know I've been in social situations where there's obvious conflict between two people in the group, and the whole group becomes uncomfortable with the situation. So it's not only the fact that this type of behavior is affecting one person, but it also kind of spoils it for the entire group.
Mm.
And how many people said, "Grandma, you're drunk, go to bed"?
Well, let me
Because
read
you
some more of the other comments, actually. Keep talking, guys. Actually, no, you can't, because I want to read a comment. Just give me a second. Three Russia says, this is something his sister said to him. He says, I have a husband, I have children, I have a house. What do you have? You have nothing. Those were the last words spoken to me in anger by my eldest sister. Now, I know Karu has something to say about this.
Well, it's hard to say if we don't have the individual's answer. Because with what she said, she may have had a perfect point about the guy's life. If all he's doing is just sitting in his bedroom and playing video games the entire time, or just slowly killing himself, the woman might have a point. It's just one of those questions that just lacks context. And considering that she is his sister, she probably has a bit more insight into the guy's life than just taking the question at face value.
Yeah, but this suggests that she's putting the knife in and making herself feel better compared to him. She might have these things and he doesn't. Yeah, we don't know the context. Maybe he does want a family and children and he doesn't have them, and she's sticking the knife in to sort of make herself feel above him and put him down. On the other hand, the conversation says nothing about his state. He might be happy, and she's trying to shame him for something he doesn't have, nor does he doesn't care about having. He might not care about children or a family. So, yeah, the context isn't there. But the thing is, I can relate it to the old woman where she's not trying to make me feel bad or shame me, but don't talk to me about what I don't have if you're not willing to engage. Like, am I happy about the things that you think I should value that I don't have? So you could bludgeon me. Like, you get people, religious people who try and convert you, and they insist on like, no, but I can make you happy. And if you come over here and sign up for this and sign up for my vision, you will have all of this. And you're like, well, I don't want it, but you do want it. You just don't know it. And it's that same sort of insistence where even if you think the other person's naive, you value kids and family and religion or whatever, and you want to bring them over to your side because you want to give them some of your happiness. If the person has no interest, you're being a bully. Let them discover later on that they regret not taking your advice, not having kids, not having family. But I just see it as kind of shame and bullying.
She's an average woman. What do you expect? It's like going to a religious gathering and then being surprised that people talk about religion. There needs to be a level of realistic expectation with the places that you go and the conversations that you're potentially going to have. I know that if I go and visit my old grandma, she's going to bring up that, oh, why aren't you dating? Why are you still single? Why are you doing all of these things and yada yada yada? Like, there are certain things that people are going to ask you if they've made certain life choices, if they're from a particular age group, and so on and so forth. I just expect a lot of these things to happen. Yeah, sometimes they come from left field, and I don't expect them when they're being dropped. But that's how life is. I just don't take them personally. I have a sister that really that she lived her entire life for her kids. She sacrificed a lot of things to make sure that her kids were fine, that they were doing as best as they could. She put a lot of effort and resources into raising them, and she loves them a lot. I know that this is a very sensitive topic for her, and as much as I don't share some of the same values that she did, I would never go out of my way to try and hurt her or say anything hurtful about her kids or her family. Not that I would want to anyway. I have no reason to. They're great kids. But I know that eventually, even though my sister's not that type of person, she might ask me, well, why aren't you doing this? She has way too much respect for me to do that. But it is something that I expect to eventually happen. I know that my dad's going to ask me that question. I know that my grandparents are going to ask me that. I know that the friends that I have that are married will ask me that question, even if they know me very, very well. It's something that's going to pop up in conversation, and it doesn't necessarily need to be antagonistic towards me. It's just how things are. I don't know. For me, it, it's like walking into a tiger's den and then expecting the tiger not to pounce on you.
Yeah, I get it, but there's kind of a, if I respect you as an elder, at least, meet me 20% of the way with respecting me as someone a little bit younger than you, that I'm not a child as well. So I expect the conversation with an older woman to be children, family. I expect it. I know. But again, and I know her conversation and insistence with me would be the same with a gay guy. Like, why are you gay? Why you not want family? Why you don't, I know she'd probably do the same thing, but it's still tactless. It's still rude. You don't like it, but you wouldn't like being force-fed either, Grandma. You should know better. But again, the point here, well, the point here isn't the grandma, it's the behavior, and why I was ranting in the last video about generally people when they do this. I think it's an interesting topic, and I think this kind of behavior stops a lot of people being open. They evade, they lie. In the comment they said, "Oh, human, you should have just lied and said blah, blah, blah and got her off your back." But I don't like lying about things that I have an opinion on. Like, I have an opinion on kids and relationships and marriage. Why should I avoid my own, wealth of knowledge? And I've talked about this stuff, and I just kind of spoon feed some idiot or narrow-minded person what they want to hear. I may as well not even talk to them. So I don't want to be dishonest. I want to express who I am. But the person doesn't care, as they said in the comments. Like, you're not there. You're invisible.
I think that the difference comes from the perspective. You're looking at the behavior. I'm looking both at the behavior and where it's coming from. Because the behavior taken within the void doesn't really mean anything. That's why I said things like this don't really affect me, because I care about who expresses the behavior. Yeah, I'm not perfect, and sometimes things will get under my skin, but some random guy insulting you and saying the things that the commenter earlier mentioned, it's one thing to get them from a guy on the street. It's another thing to get them from your sister. One of them is definitely going to be more hurtful than the other. And with your particular case, if this old woman, because we keep coming back to this example, if she was a stranger, I don't care. Like, yeah, maybe it was a slight annoyance for the moment. It doesn't matter. If this was my mother and she knew that I cared about those topics, if I had multiple conversations with her explaining what my point of view is, then it would hurt. Then it would get under my skin, and it would a lot faster than if the old woman did that. And I think that's where kind of the short circuit in the communication is. I can look at behaviors and avoid and try to intellectualize them and say, well, I don't like how this acts, how what kind of impact this has on conversations and everywhere else. But when I see somebody acting like that, I just shut the door. Like, it doesn't matter. This is irrelevant to me. I care about the people that I choose to be next to me and the behaviors that they exhibit. And if one of them acts like that, well, there's another door that needs to be closed.
Yeah, but when you're in that moment and you can't move, like, say, for instance, we talked about giving a child a pass. Even if a child is screaming next to me, the women are more likely to give a screaming child a pass because there's a maternal connection there. But everyone else, you see every guy kind of just go, oh, like it's like nails on a chalkboard. I can't be zen when it's imposed on me. And when someone who I want to give a pass keeps doing that, I can't. If a 5-year-old is like pulling at me and like, dabbing ice cream on my shirt, I can't just go, ha ha, zen. There's kind of, you have to do it like you're caught between a rock and a hard place. Yeah, again, we can talk about excuses and stuff, but
Well,
yeah, how
then
do you
you
think
do
I
what
should? What do you think I should have done? Sitting right next to her, having dinner, I can't move, and she wouldn't stop.
well, you did what Boffin did with his friend's kid. You bend her over your knee and you slap her a couple of times on the behind, and she's fine. I guarantee that she won't say anything anymore. I'm obviously joking, but uh, I assume that other people, like Boffin said, were probably annoyed at the little tidbit of conversation that happened. You could have just excused yourself, went to the bathroom, said that you were getting a phone call, not engaged with the woman for the rest of the night, or just told her, look, this conversation is uncomfortable to me. I don't know exactly how she acted or how much you really wanted to push that topic. Or you could have just left the party if you wanted to, if it really meant that much to you. I go, you can find, and we can sit here and brainstorm solutions for everything. Or you could have just had a conversation about kids with the woman, and you could have just told her, yeah, you know what, you have a good point. I'm going to consider it, and maybe we'll have kids in the future. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, look, I don't want people to kind of think it didn't really affect me that much. It was the interesting point about a one-sided conversation like that. I had a good time, and I did actually try to ask her questions about, how many kids do you have? And when you came to Australia, it was different, and kids running around and so on. But she kept saying, so why don't you want kids? So I don't and it was just real, like I could not have a conversation. So again, I'm just making a point of one-sided conversations, and you're basically invisible. People don't want to even meet you part way. That's the point. No, I don't want to harp on the woman. She's just an example of this. Any more that I would harp on, say one comment, some spurg in the comment section said something, and I'm going to make a whole point on it like it's really the wrong thing to do, or I'm really upset about it. It's not that. What is the focus for me is the one-sided conversation, and also how that bleeds into people's own problems with lack of relationships, lack of having friends. When you can't even meet people part way and be interested enough to listen and then provide, talk back and have that nice feedback loop going, and actually see the picture of this other person's world, and then talk about your opinion in relation to seeing their world, not just seeing your world and talking to a cardboard cutout that looks like me. Talk in the mirror. You'll be a lot happier. The conversation will flow a lot better than it will with me. It's just about the structure of a one-sided conversation that really stood out for me there with the old woman. And again, it's not about her. It's about that dynamic.
Well, here's a slightly different perspective. If all else fails and there's no way to build a bridge and to have a conversation, just do what all of the manosphere channels are constantly trying to teach the people out there. Lie.
Yeah.
Lie about how good you are, lie about what you like, lie about your values.
Yeah. I got a comment in the chat by someone saying, why didn't you just tell her you were infertile? It's like, I don't want to lie. Like, am I going to lie to evade everything? Half of the problems that people have with communication and relationship is evasion, lying, playing games. Because you want a certain outcome, you will say and do everything to the ends always justify the means. And it's not the case. How you win, how you get to your goal matters. But apparently some of these people think they can live with any methods to get what they want. And I don't think that's true.
Well, tell that to the people that are extinct.
I don't think you're framing it correctly, though, Human, because this isn't a question of lying to someone to further your ambitions. This is lying to someone to try to minimize the impact that they've put you in terms of an uncomfortable situation. You really only had a few options, and for me personally, a deception at that point is probably the lesser of the lesser of the evil for all of the other options. You could have blown up at the old woman and say, "Look, I've answered your question 5 times. Now shut up." Or you could have done like Carew suggested, got up, excused yourself from the table, and wandered off, and hoped that when you returned, she would have dropped the subject. Or you can just brush it off with a lie. To
Mm,
me, that's probably the most civil, best option for everyone involved, including the other guests at the get together.
mm.
That's more of a diversionary tactic than it is a lie in my mind. You're just
I
trying to
think
put
that's
this.
yeah. I think that's what I should have done. That was the lesson I came away with. Aside from kind of this interesting thing I wanted to talk about, one-sided conversations, is that the tactic I'll use from now on is to divert the conversation elsewhere where I see it's not going anywhere. It's not a conversation, and politely go, find a segue out of that if I can't actually leave, if I'm stuck there
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
person. So
It's
that
only
was my fault. That like next time I can learn to maybe do that.
it's only a conversation if both people want to converse.
Sure. But yeah,
It, it's it.
there's a distinction. I don't want to lie, but diverting the conversation when you know it's not going anywhere and the person's very myopic in the way they're talking, that's the only thing you got to do. Because so I'm not lying, I'm just diverting it because this
Yeah,
person's not
yeah.
being reasonable. Another comment by Xantipus, whatever. He says, people with different mindsets can have productive exchanges even if they don't intend to change their mind. It's all about how they are able to share their own perspectives respectfully. Yes, I agree. I'm never offended by differing ideas. I find them interesting. I'm only offended if you offend me personally. If you insult me or my family, direct me. Everyone knows what like directional, like intentional hate and humiliation and rudeness is. But just a differing opinion, when people get like the old woman appear like a deer in the headlights and they've taken it personally, it's like, this is just my opinion, sweetheart. It's nothing about you. But some people just are so self-referential. Any opinion that they care about must be someone else's and they need to fight them and to defend their own opinion. It's like, I don't want to take your opinion away from you. Like, keep it, but allow me to keep mine too. This lack of live and let live is the funny thing for me. Do any of you have anything to say about that comment about people with different mindsets having can have productive exchanges without insisting that the other person change their mind?
I think that's adult behavior. I mean, isn't that the very definition of adult interaction with another adult?
Wasn't there a philosopher that says that the sign of an intelligent mind is the ability to entertain a thought without accepting it? Something like that. I
Yeah,
can't remember who said it.
yeah.
And I think that's pretty apt here and in general. It goes towards confidence, knowing where you stand and not being threatened, not walking on eggshells. Like, it's just a great perspective, being able to entertain any thought without having to embrace it or hold it. You can, from a distance, behind glass, talk and look at anything. And developing that perspective, I think it really develops your own sense of security and ability not to be afraid of any situation or talking to anyone, as long as they don't impose themselves on you. That's kind of that's the important thing.
To me,
Karu?
that's
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Boffin. You got more?
a sure sign of a well-adjusted adult.
Mm.
Well,
Do
that was Aristotle, and I think Rocket should read that quote multiple times tonight.
Yeah. Oh. Derpa Leaper. Thank you for the super chat. They said, "So human, why don't you want kids?" Couldn't resist. Okay, they're being funny. Actually, a funny comment. I want to read this one. This was actually funny, and initially I thought it was real, but they were being funny. Big Ol typed into Chat GPT, the AI. He typed the question, please lecture human about why he should have kids in a nagging tone. And then this is what Chat GPT lectured me about. He said, seriously, you're still on the fence about having kids. Look, I get it. Life's comfy without little ones running around, but let me give you a reality check on why you should quit dragging your feet and start a family. First off, let's talk legacy. You think all those late night work sessions and career climbing will mean squat when you're old and grey? Nope. Kids are living, breathing proof that you existed and did something other than binge watching TV shows. And don't even start with the kids are expensive whining. Newsflash, everything costs money. But guess what? That doesn't mean you keep hoarding your cash like a dragon guarding its treasure. Having kids teaches you to budget, make sacrifices. I agree with that. And put someone else's needs before your own. I agree with that too. It continues. Yeah, I said it. Say goodbye to that new gaming console, but say hello to responsibility. Oh, you're wondering about your precious freedom? Yeah, because having a family is like being shackled, right? Wrong. Sure, you won't be jetting off to the Bahamas on a whim, but the joy of watching your child take their first steps or say their first words is a reward that makes your freedom seem like peanuts. And let's talk about loneliness in your golden age. Those friends you're spending all your time with now, chances are that they'll have their own families to attend to, but if you raise a couple of kids, you've got built-in companions for life. No need to chase down a nursing home spot just yet. Feeling self-centered much? Having kids is like the ultimate self-improvement boot camp. Say goodbye to those lazy Sundays and hello to non-stop action. You'll learn patience, time management, negotiation skills, and multitasking like a pro. Those work meetings will be child's play compared to a toddler's meltdown in a supermarket. And hey, let's not forget about posterity. You know, when you're pushing daisies, your kids will be carrying your genes forward, spreading your unique brand of awareness to future generations. So if you don't want your fame to fizzle out like a dud firework, better start procreating. Now, about those sleepless nights, yeah, they're inevitable. But guess what? Your nocturnal Netflix binges and gaming marathons will seem like distant memories once you hold that squirming bundle of joy in your arms. You'll be too busy marveling at your creation to care about sleep. Oh, and the adventure factor. Having kids is like jumping into the unknown with both feet. You'll experience first steps, first words, first school days, all those first that make your life richer and more colorful than you ever imagined. It's like a roller coaster that never stops. And guess what? You're on the ride. So there you have it. A nagging lecture on why you should quit stalling and start a family. It's time to grow up, embrace chaos, and become a part of something bigger than yourself. Trust me, you won't regret it. And if you do, well, at least you'll have someone to blame. End of Chat GPT telling me how I should have a kid.
Was that written by a computer or a religious cult?
Yes.
No, that sounds exactly like one of the videos from the new manosphere that's trying to criticize women about not having kids.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure a lot of content creators, they just type out create this content in this tone, and it generates a script.
You know, it's interesting. We've been talking for quite a while about some poor old lady who can't understand why you don't want children, but we haven't talked at all about the relationship as far as dating goes, and the question: are you in a one-sided conversation?
Well, I would say it translates there as well, wouldn't it?
It's the same dynamic. How many dates have you been on where you felt like you were in a one-sided conversation?
Well, here's a more interesting one. How many guys go there submitting to everything the grandma says, but to chicky poo across the table because you like her?
Exactly.
So she's the same grandma saying, I like kids, I like family. Do you like kids? And you won't say, well, no, I don't like kids. And she'll insist, why not? You'll say, oh, yeah, I like kids like you. And I agree with everything you say, grandma. And yes, like, can I take you to bed? That's the default. That
Yeah.
figuratively speaking, there is no expression of your boundaries or if you do and don't want kids. I'd say on the date, they're just agreeable and say yes to everything and bullshit the grandma in terms of the girl sitting across them.
And I would argue, Human, that it's an order of magnitude more important to be honest with that girl sitting across the table than it is grandma when those issues come up. As uncomfortable it is having grandma question you about children, in the long term, as far as how it impacts your life, if you're not capable of being honest with that girl sitting across the table telling you that she wants 6 kids and you want none, that's going to have a much more serious impact on your life than the uncomfortable conversation with the grandma.
Well, this is what dating has taught me is whenever I was agreeable and didn't actually give my honest opinion, things turned out crap. And so what that taught me dating over the years is be honest, be honest, be honest. And it's kind of like if you're honest with yourself, you're off the hook. If you express that honesty, you're off the hook. You may not get the short skirt, the bimbo, the one night stand, the girlfriend, the whatever it is. But if you have the tact of knowing how to talk respectfully in front of a boss, or more casually like yourself in front of family, friends, and dates, you can't go wrong with just being honest and not lying. Articulating that honesty is another thing. A lot of people just don't find an interest in it, or they spurg out, they have a temper or whatever, but that's on you. You'll get the results of your short temper. You'll get the results of not being able to defer gratification and just like, red flag, but I want to sleep with her. You're going to get the results of all of that. So I just think that if you make it a point to try as best you can not to lie to yourself, the consequences will always be much, much better and you'll get a better life.
Agreed.
Any closing words, Karu or Boffin? I think we're approaching nearly 2 hours, and I've got to go to this cemetery and visit Dad's grave, and I've got something to do later on. And anything you guys want to comment on some of these things, or any of the comments I've shared with you from the commenters over the last week?
There was a comment left on the last video you posted, Human. I just wanted to mention it real quickly. It was posted by Sober Diogenes. And this is related to something we were talking about the other night as far as how difficult it is for people to sort through information in the world today, but more specifically the internet. And he left this comment that I thought really connected up well with what we were talking about the other night. He says, he says, many years ago, I remember that a lecturer said, we are coming to the end of an age of instant information, and now the age of disinformation will begin, not due to ill will, but the quantity of information will be so high, with its quality being so low, that with an instant access to it for an average person, we will witness regression unseen since the fall of Rome. And I thought that was such a profound observation. We've got to the point where we have access to all of this information, but there's so much of it being dumped out into the world now that people aren't sure what to pay attention to anymore. A lot of it is wrong advice, bad advice, and not necessarily due to ill intentions. It's just that everything gets dumped out there now and we're left sorting through it.
Yeah, I would agree. The impulsiveness is never a good idea. That, I mentioned the deferral of gratification. If you can't even defer latching on to the first thing you get fed by Google and saying that's my opinion, you never sort of research, sit still, read some longer form content, get a broader understanding of the world. If you just kind of that instantaneous amount of information everywhere, it's like the way I mentioned that we don't really make choices. We just latch on to a bias, and that's our opinion. We don't really make a new informed decision. It's very rare, and it requires sitting still. Not only do we have so much information, it's coming at us at like a faster rate than ever before. So we just kind of grab something from this fast moving stream, like a bear catching a trout. And that's it. And this is the truth. I caught a fish. It's like, what? That's not what being informed is.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, taking what Boffin said to heart, how many times have you heard the advice of don't go to college and become an electrician? Don't do X, do Y. Do what I tell you because I know what's best. Don't go out and talk to people. Invest in X. Do all of these things, particularly from people that either have their lives already set up or they have some kind of involvement in a certain game. Oh, buy this type of cryptocurrency because I did the same with my money. You know, do everything in your power to keep me stable while you're the one losing. We're just reaching the point where bad advice is everywhere. And look at the type of content that's being consumed nowadays. You can have very high quality content and people aren't going to care. They like to get that dopamine hit as fast as possible. And even with all the things that I said now, I guarantee you that there's going to be someone in chat. But have you seen how much college costs? Well, if you're smart enough and you go to a proper college, you're going to pay that sum of money within a couple of years. How many times have you heard people say in YouTube videos, "Oh, go and become an engineer"? And then you look at your country's stats and you realize that you have way too many engineers in your country. But somehow you still receive that advice from the wise people that make YouTube videos. A lot of the times it's forgotten that most of the individuals that make this type of content, they're just entertainers. And a lot of the time, even if the audience may not like it, they're usually within the range of intelligence of the content creator. And most of the times they're below the level of intelligence of the content creator. Because if they're way too smart, there's nothing that they can get out of your content. If they're way, way too dumb, they can't relate to what you're talking about. So this entire idea that we can just ignore everything and the pillars of society by which we've been built, by the way. You're using the same language that your ancestors used. You're using the same math that's been taught for generations. You're not going to be able to say disengage from that system and go live in the woods. Start creating your own language and then see how you can relate to people like that. Oh, all these people that went in the woods, do you know where they got their axe from chopping lumber? They didn't make it themselves. They got it from fucking Walmart. And you know how it got to Walmart? With fuel that other people got from the ground, with iron that other people got from the ground. So stop lying to yourself.
Yeah, this age now is like fragmented everything, and if you don't have an interest in slowing down and planning the map of what step you'll take next, and not jumping into this fast moving stream, you're just going to be swallowed and you're going to drown. So if you don't care about slowing down and trying to make better decisions and learning from them, having better conversations and all this stuff, and just being sucked in by entertainers masquerading as Marcus Aurelius, it's going to swallow a lot of people up because we don't have the mentors anymore. Entertainment is promoting itself as education. People aren't being practical. People don't know how to talk to each other. It seems like human interaction is just a stream of using people and abusing people and getting your own, and you don't care what you leave behind. And then you complain later on about the way you acted, as though what you weren't contributing to it. We've talked already about these guys that, keep promoting hooking up and treating women as badly as you claim they've treated you, but then also you complain about the quality of women out there that you produce as well, or the result of the quality of the life that you produce by your lack of honest communication, or your game playing, or me having to lie to the grandma and never having to be honest. Like, the more people can be honest and slow down, the better their lives are going to become, because this world's not slowing down. It's just going to get worse and worse. All the guardrails that society used to have there for people, from dating to social life to the respect of men and women, all of that is gone. You're starting from zero now, and everyone's very political. You rarely have a person that's an individual who can tell you their points of view. It's usually they're a version of a politically constructed individual, from their from what shows they watch, what's cool. They don't actually know what's cool. They're just kind of riding the wave of what's in now. And you can tell by the level of conversation you have with these people. Again, you don't need to be someone who holds a Mensa card, but I've met really grounded, logical, sort of workers, people who work with their hands, that you could tell they might not have a high IQ, but I have such an easy, grounded, reality-based conversation with them, and it's really enjoyable. And then you have a conversation with sort of some modern spurg with a PhD that lives online, and they kind of I can't relate to them. I can't talk to them with the human language. They're almost on stage doing a Shakespeare play with their lexicon and their intellect, and none of it you can tell. They haven't lived life. They haven't touched grass. Like you said, they're talking expertly about their position simply because they've got qualifications, yet they've never touched grass in life in relation to their PhD at all. They've done experiments, theories, papers, and they've got, they've got what's the word? They've got the clout and status, but they haven't sort of, they're not prepared to talk to people that aren't on their level. They're not prepared to talk to people, especially about life and relationships, with people who also do life and relationships. No, you've got to be in their very esoteric view. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. I really have to go. We're approaching 2 hours. Thank you, guys. I hope I didn't swallow too much of the conversation, and it wasn't too one-sided by me. But
but I do want to mention something, Human, because that rant can't go unnoticed. And you yourself made the perfect point of why the old woman was right, and you should have kids. Because without you having kids, all the values that you've just discussed, they're going to go out the window. All of the things that you value, that you've expressed about a healthy society, without people like you having kids, are just going to disappear.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Objectively, I can. But then
so
you've got
go ahead and have kids.
Look, the precursor as well. Look, I'm old, and my interests and my values have kind of cemented over the years. Objectively, also, if society had the same structure, guardrails, made it very easy for the naive teenager or 20-something-year-old male that really didn't know himself well, but at the very least, it will allow him to meet a relatively decent person, whether or not you're compatible, but you both have the baseline of respecting each other as people and knowing how to conduct yourself and not hating on each other and doing the right thing and, keeping your household and earning money and supporting family. I've always said I could have easily had a kid with the first person I, wanted to get serious with, because it was the right thing to do 100 years ago, maybe. But now, with the quality of people and not having the guardrails of society, of religion, or anything else, I'm forced to I can only make a decision when it feels right to me and what I want, because I can't do it for the society that seems like it doesn't care for me. I can't do it with women who hate me. I can't do it Do you know what I mean? There's nothing for me to start with. Even in my naivety, I couldn't start with anything and respect myself. Like later on, it still becomes harder. And the person I met, that was luck coming across them as well. But if I hadn't come across them, I wouldn't have even been with anyone else. So there's a lot of factors that come into your life that you can only make the best decision you can. But 100 years ago, I would say I probably would have got married in my early 20s. Oh, I would agree with that. Not that I'm going to have kids now. I have zero interest, and I don't pull up very well once I go for an hour run. I need about a week to recover. So if I was a father, I'd like to teach the kid to play basketball and run around with them. And by the time they get to the age where I want to support them in their sport and whatever, I'm not going to be there as well. And also the idea of an impressionable child that's still living at home and, you know, their family starts dying in front of them, that's not going to serve them well going forward as well. So if I wanted kids, I should have had kids earlier, but I never wanted them, and I'll accept full responsibility, even if in the next 10 years I kind of flip and find God or want to have kids or something. But that's going to be on me because I didn't make the choice. I'm not going to blame women or society or anything. It's like I made the best choice I could and who I was at the time I did it.
I know. I was just bashing your nuts for a little bit.
I know. But I also wanted to relay for some of the guys that maybe are being pressured there at the crossroads. They're not sure. They objectively think, I do want to leave genes behind. I do want to maybe have kids, or I'm open to it. I want them to think about that too. And you could be at a point in your life, if you're a guy listening to this, where you're not sure. You have a girlfriend that's pushy, or she's going to leave you, and the parents are pushing you, and you feel like you're being unreasonable. So you might just pull the trigger and say, you know what, I've got a nice partner. She's upset that I'm stalling on having a kid. Yeah, maybe one day. I don't know if I want one or not. And my parents are pressuring me. My friends are having kids. I might as well. What am I afraid of? And then you do it. It might work out well, but it might not. But just being realistic about the finality of these kind of choices are good too. It's called being responsible too. I just knew it was a very hard no. And that hard no never became flexible at all. So anyway, any last words, guys, before we wrap it up?
Great conversation, guys.
Yeah, great stream. I agree.
Yeah, thanks for showing up. And everyone else, I'll catch you in the next video or stream. Have a good weekend. Happy Father's Day to everyone in Australia. And I'll catch you later. Bye.